Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you are right now. And welcome to another session of Bizarre Financing, how to start, buy, or expand any business and do it with little or none of your own cash. Today we have as our guest Brian Lewis. You've experienced him in the past. About 6 months or so ago, he had called me to thank me for the program and that he had become a millionaire literally in 30 days from the time that he got the information to the time that he was able to execute that and buy himself a business in the real estate field. And he'll talk more about that, I'm sure, today as well. Then several months later, he went on to acquire an oil company. Many of you had the chance to experience his approach to that company. He hadn't closed it yet by the last time that we had talked to him, but that has since happened and he has closed that purchase. So now he has those two companies and he's well down the road for a third company now. And that third company is a trucking company. So I'm sure he'll be talking about that today. And also, we're going to talk to him a little bit, of course, about how he's doing all this wonderful stuff and what techniques he's using, what methods he's using, how he's getting his deals financed. And a lot of this is going to translate into how you can too. So without much further explanation, I'm going to ask Brian to unmute his microphone and say hi to everybody. Hi, Brian.
Hey, how's it going, Gordon? Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great. I'm doing really great, Brian. And apparently you are too. I'm very excited for you. So,
Oh, I'm doing wonderful.
yeah, well, that's great. That's great. The first thing I want to hear about is the oil company, because the last time we talked, you were deep into the negotiations and due diligence and all the things that one does when one acquires a company. And so I'd like you to tell me about how that all worked out and pick it up from the point where we were last time, where you were doing those things, and then what happened since and how did it all come out?
Absolutely, Gordon. So, where we are now with the oil company is we are currently there getting systems optimized and, making things more efficient than where we were, prior to us talking. But to answer your question, we were able to get things buttoned up. We had talked, you and I had talked briefly. We were in the process of pulling capital together and going to the lending institutions where the actual company was, kind of funneling a lot of their funds through and, looking for financing in various places. However, our partner and I, we were able to pull some private money together. And, we did that based on, EBITDA of what the company is doing. If you don't know what EBITDA is, that is earnings before taxes and interest. So based on doing, those numbers and things, it made sense to a couple of our partners. One of the partners, he has a substantial real estate holdings out in the Raleigh-Durham area. And another one of our partners, actually, he purchased a distillery and he distills vodka. And, he's pretty big. So he's got over, I would say, somewhere around 800 employees from what we were told. So that's kind of how we, negotiated some things, pulled those funds together. And we had a lot of challenges, Gordon, I must say. The person that we actually had running the company for us, because our goal when we come into these companies is not to go in and run them ourselves. Our goal is to, pretty much get online and find somebody who has the credentials in running these businesses and making them more efficient than where they are. So we had a gentleman who was running the company. He was actually the mayor of the town at the time. And when he started to go in for the training, after we had gotten things tightened up, unfortunately, he had passed away, man. And we had gotten a call from the guys down there saying that he had had a massive heart attack, or his wife found him in the house. So that was a major blow to us, especially just coming in, trying to optimize, like I said, the efficiency in the company. And we now have a gentleman who's going to be running the company who is a Harvard graduate. And he kind of stepped in and is helping us out a lot. So, we're greatly appreciative of, just opportunities that we were able to take advantage of and really just utilizing the system that you have in place. And I know, we say it over and over again, just, how packed the website is that you have, how packed full of knowledge these webinars can be. But, literally, the way that we're doing these deals is like I said, I take your course and I treat it like a PhD program, and we sit down and we study it. You know, we study really the terminologies. We study the questions and things that you would ask a seller or an owner of a company, and we literally come in and we use those strategies and we use what you teach in those webinars, and this is how we're able to acquire these companies. So I will say this: it's easy to get involved in one when it comes down to running it, and anything could happen. And we're a prime example of that. But it's the person that kind of perseveres and continues to push forward that those are the ones who get things done. So that's where we're at with that oil company. So right now we're trying to really push this company from being a $3.5 million company to a $5 million company within the next 2 to 3 years are our projections. So.
Well, that's exciting. That really is exciting. And the thing that I like most about what you're doing is that you're buying them all, the ones that you were looking at and have bought, with the idea that they got to grow, okay? Because you want them to be substantially more cash flow as they go on in the future to help pay off any of the debt that you have in the leveraging of the purchase of it. You remind me of something that my mom used to say to me, which was, son, you got to be careful of what you ask for because you might get it.
That's right. That's right, man. That's right.
Yeah. And it's like the dog chasing the car and, I caught it.
Now what do I do? Right.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, but
Absolutely.
that could be the fun part too. And you're very fast on your feet. And it seems to me like you took this blow of not having the person there that you had planned on having to run it, but you don't let that stop you. You know that
Right.
everything's a function of people, and people have what you want, and they'll give it to you if you give them what they want. And the question is, who's
Absolutely.
out there that has what you want, can do it, and what does it take to get them to want to work with you to make it happen? So you did that, and you may find that this guy works out great or doesn't. You change him. I mean, life goes on. I mean, I always like to look at Donald Trump, right? Master at firing people. Why? Because not everybody works out, right?
That's
So
right.
eventually you find the ones that work and you cut your losses short and then you ride your winners long. That's how money really gets made over periods of time. Also, just as an observation, you're very realistic about your growth projections for your company. So that helps too. A lot of times people complete an acquisition and next thing you know, they're planning on it growing to the moon in a year. Well,
Right.
it takes a year. It takes a year at least to get your arms around the company,
Get
um,
acclimated.
get
Yep.
acclimated, really understand really what's going on there, identify those things that you can really get accomplished in a reasonable amount of time, execute those, make some mistakes, pick yourself up, re-get it done. It just takes time to do that. And then once you do that for a year, sometimes a year and a half, if you're lucky, now you have a fine-tuned machine. And at that point, now growth becomes real and you can start to really make that growth happen. With a little bit of luck, also, Brian, you might find another oil company out there.
Absolutely. Here's a funny thing, Gordon, if you don't mind me interjecting. I was
I
at the
don't mind
dentist.
at all. And by the way, just let me say this, okay?
Yeah.
You interrupt me anytime you want because today, listen, you are the star. I want to help bring out the things that you're doing so that everybody can get a sense of
And
them.
I would love to share it, man. I
Yeah.
really would.
Yeah, go
Would
for
love
it.
to share it. Yeah, it was funny that you said, purchasing another oil company. I'm sitting in the dentist chair and having some work done, and my dentist, she's talking to me about, just some of the accomplishments and things and goals that I had projected. And when you go to somebody quite regularly, then they, kind of know what you're doing in your life. And parenthetically, she tells me, she says, well, my brother-in-law just bought an oil company as well, and she kind of was telling me some of the strategies he used. And although we bought two separate companies, they were a little bit different. Our company was more of a distribution and logistics company. He actually is in Texas finding, these old wells, or wells that are, I guess, people had drilled them, and then for whatever reason they're not profitable, so they go in, put money into the business, of course, and they increase value there. So she was telling me a lot of different things, but I wanted to say all that to say this. There's opportunities out here, Gordon, that you just wouldn't believe. After I did the first acquisition, which was the real estate acquisition, and I, acquired the firm and, all the assets that came with it, these deals just kept coming to me. My business partner and I, before I jumped on this call, I had to rush out of the meeting. We had a gentleman bring us an assisted living home out in Texas. So we're looking into that. We're actually setting up a Zoom call with the owner on Wednesday when we get back into town, and we'll be talking with him. He's highly motivated. So that's something else, since you and I have talked, that is also on the table and we're taking a look at. But one thing I will say as far as getting these deals done, and I can't stress this enough, is sometimes you go into these transactions and you're thinking, at least I know I did when I first started off, which is, where's this money going to come from? I didn't have $1.2 million, to put up for a company. And, you're negotiating these numbers and it all sounds good and you're putting it on paper. Then after you get the contract and you get things kind of lined up and you're ready to move, now you've got to go out and shop for this money. And that takes just as much energy and effort as it does to find these deals. In fact, I found that you find the deals quicker sometimes than you find the money. But I will say this, if you do the deal correctly and you kind of follow the steps that's put in front of you, you will notice that the money will show up. It'll show up every time because the deal is good and it'll speak for itself. So I wanted to throw that out there just because I don't want, a lot of people will get caught up and hung up on where's this, where's it going to come from? Even if your credit is not the best, even if, and we talk about it, that's what the whole program is, Gordon, is how can you buy businesses without any cash or using your own credit? I've learned, even when it comes to the situation with the credit, if you structure these deals properly and you do it right, sometimes you will leverage other people's credit who have the credit and you're bringing the deal. So if I may jump into this, how do we come up with the $1.2 million for this transaction? And I'm going to dive into that if you
All
don't
right.
mind.
Well, this is great. This is like going to be the interview where you get to interview yourself.
Okay.
Because you're anticipating the questions that I would naturally ask you. And so until you start to take a wrong turn, you just go for it. You're doing great.
Okay. All right, great. So here's how we came up with the money. And I want you to really imagine this and start thinking creatively as we tell you this story. So money is a lot of different things. And sometimes we think of money as paper cash, or you think of it as credit. But what you don't think of money is, a lot of times, is an idea. And an idea can be something as simple as structure. How do I structure this deal to where there's equity or money already in the transaction that I can take claim to through what we call equitable title in any kind of business transaction. So what we did was we came in and we did a lot of legwork before we ever shot this deal. And the deal that we're talking about more in particular is the oil company. So as we were putting the funds together, or trying to put the funds together, what we did is we went and negotiated with the owner a favorable owner finance. And the way that we did it was, I didn't come and just offer him an owner finance right out and say, hey, I want to offer you 1.2 million over a 10-year balloon, and we're going to make these monthly payments and give you this down. What we did is we structured 3 to 5 offers. Some were cash offers. Of course, they were relatively lower than the actual offer that we wanted him to take on the owner finance. But we made sure that when we structured the owner finance, it was so attractive that he almost couldn't turn it down. And when you do a deal and you come into it with this type of creativity, and you come into it with this type of mind frame of a win-win, then all of a sudden you realize cash to be more than just paper dollars. And there's also an idea or a way that you structure and put something together. So out of the offers that we offered this owner, like I said, we had some that were a larger amount cash. We'd pay it out in cash. Of course, the all cash offer was probably the least amount. Then we had another offer where we would pay some cash down, and then we would pay some over a term. Some of the interest rates varied, but you just got to get really creative with this. And I don't want to waste all of our time going into each, the intricacies of each detailed offer. But what I will say is, once we came to a favorable term, where he knew that it was beneficial for him on the tax side not to take $1.2 million into his bank account on the retirement. It was more beneficial for him to come in and say, hey, these guys want to do an owner finance. They're going to put 10% down. So we put $120,000 down on the transaction. And here's how they're going to structure it. And here's why I love these deals, Gordon. If an owner is willing to do an owner finance or do a creative finance or something that's creative in this way, that shows me that he believes in the company just as much as I believe that the company can work. If he's willing to stay in and hold the note for 10 or 15 years, that means that he has no doubt in his mind that the cash flow that's coming off of this company is going to cover whatever bills are coming out or is going to cover whatever notes that I owe him. And it also assures me that he's in it as a partner, and he's going to make sure that I'm successful by pouring his knowledge, his experience, and even sometimes his capital to make sure that the transaction works. So I wanted to kind of frame that in a way so that the listeners can understand that we didn't come into the company with $1.2 million. But what we can say is this now that we have an agreement with the seller that he's going to hold the note for however long, and we're going to put this money down, what happens is now we have equity in the deal because we've negotiated that equity in the deal. So now we've got $1.2 million in the transaction, which is what we're paying him. And if we need to go raise money on the outside, now we can come to our investors and say, hey, we've already got 1.2 million in the deal, which is what we negotiated. So I'm trying to frame here, and if I'm doing a good job, Gordon, if I'm not, stop me at any time, but I'm framing the mind frame that sometimes your equity will not just come from what's already in the transaction and the assets, but your equity will also come from what you negotiate. So
yeah, really, really good insight. Really good insight. Here's one of the things that I'd like to invite you to do at a future webinar, because we won't have time to construct it today. What I like to do on these webinars is to have graphics, and especially when you get to numbers, right? Okay, because numbers can kind of fly around in your head, right? And it sounds good, but they're just bouncing around in there. So what you and I can right. do, and it would maybe take an hour or two at the most, is before a webinar where you come back again, is to take one of these transactions and just structure it out. In other words, here's the numbers, here's how they played out, here's what we did, and here's the numbers that did that. I can show you how to do it, and we can together construct that, and then we can go through some of those details that today might be an unnecessary consumption of time, but we can do right. it in a way where everybody can walk away from that saying, whoa, that's how they did it.
Right, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I totally agree.
Yeah, because that's the thing that's always so amazing to me is until you see it in numbers, it's a hazy image. But once you see the right. numbers, it clears that whole thing up. So anyway, that's great. All right, what I'd like to do is to give people later in the webinar the ability to ask questions about anything we're covering now and for the rest of the time we're together. But I'd like you to kind of dive into the trucking company. Talk a little bit about that.
I would love to, man.
Where did the opportunity come from? How did you get involved in it? How is it shaping up? And what does it look like an acquisition can look like in that company?
Oh, this is going to be wonderful, man. So let me say this. Coming from a place of no money and then having money, it seems like these opportunities just fall in your lap. So this trucking company came about. My name, it kind of circulated throughout the community where I'm at. And an investor, it came to me, he actually wanted to invest into my company. We own an acquisitions firm, which we talked to you about before, Gordon, and we will raise private capital for deals, not just, on the business acquisition side, but also in real estate investing and other areas. But needless to say, a gentleman came, he wanted to invest some money into our company. And before, we took his money, I was sitting down talking to him and I said, well, listen, what are your goals? Why do you feel like you want to invest? And, where are we going here? And as, we started to dig in and get an understanding of what he was doing and where he was trying to get to. I asked him what business he was in. He says, well, I'm in the trucking industry. He said, right now, I own one truck. I'm making $8,900 a week. And, we're looking to vamp it up and go a little bit bigger. We're looking for another truck. And just, the reason I knew he was not inflating his numbers was because he was brought to me by my accountant. So he and I used the same accountant. And she, our accountant was telling, she kind of connected us. She was telling him of things that I had purchased and, kind of where my assets, kind of lied. She didn't tell him where everything was at, but she kind of made the connection there, and she validated, kind of what he was bringing in. And I said, so if you're able to bring in $8,900 a week on one truck, I said, what's holding you back from purchasing more purchasing more trucks? And he said, well, they're hard to find and this and that. And of course, with my training now and my newfound insight on just business and acquisition, my mindset was, hey, we're going to grow him externally. He's trying to grow internally by using the cash flow from the company to buy a new truck. Why not go for another trucking company that's bigger than than he is, which is, easy to find, probably just because he only has one truck. So from there, we went back through the same methods. We got in contact with some professionals between accountants, brokers, anybody in the space that would deal with trucking that we knew. We started making calls, and I got a call back from a guy. His name is Bill. He's well known, just in the business acquisition community out towards North Carolina. And he says, hey, Brian, I've got the deal that you're looking for. He says, I got an 80-year-old guy. He's been running this company. He showed me the numbers. The company was doing $2.8 million that he's netting after he pays the taxes and pays the bills. And, I says, why is he getting out? He's getting out because he's getting too old to run the company. So at that point, things made sense to us. And we literally started to just follow the systems that are in place that you have, on the pro, on the essentials. And we dove into evaluating this company. We dove into what the expenses were, what are we going to need. And I actually had to get almost like a crash course in trucking because I knew nothing about owning a trucking company. But the great thing about that, Gordon, is when you don't know about running a business, we can always hire others who have talent, and we can exchange the two. So we can exchange their talent for what they're looking for, which is capital, and maybe give them a higher pay rate than where them, what they were making at another trucking company or whatever it is that they were doing. And we can kind of step back as the owners now, and we can manage the business instead of working inside the business and, giving ourselves a new job. So that's really where we are. We've got a meeting set up where we're going down to actually meet the owner this Saturday at 10 a.m. We will be out at this trucking company, and we're going to go through the same processes that, I was just telling you that we did with the oil company and the real estate acquisitions firm, which is, we're going to sit down with him. We're going to communicate, talk. We're going to really get to know him. We're going to take a genuine interest in the owner, how he got started, how he's running the business now, what the business means to him, because this is that process that we talked about before, which is the cosmic bond. And without that bond, you almost can't have a deal. So that's where we're going with it.
Great. Well, that's really great. Now, what kind of structure are you going to use, do you think, to buy it? And this is where I'm going to be sharing with you in a few minutes a strategy that one of our other pro members used to buy a fairly significant trucking company and make it way, way more profitable than it was for the seller, and do it very, very quickly. So this is going to be really fun for us. So tell me a little bit about the structure as you see it now.
Well, right now, just from the brief communication that we had via the conference call with all the owners and myself and the guy that brought the deal, he's highly motivated. He's willing to stay in the transaction for a profit. He doesn't want to get killed on taxes. So we've done a lot of the legwork underneath the deal before we actually, spending our time going out there. But what we're looking at doing is, I told him there's a couple ways we can do it. So he's running the actual company, and it's a big company. He owns a lot of land. He converted part of his land to where he actually houses the trucks. He got they're sitting on like a dock. There's a docking station. It's concreted out. It's very nice. He spent a lot of money on it. He's going to allow us to operate out of there for a year. During that time, we will be finding our own real estate to actually house our trucks and things. So there's a couple ways that we were looking at doing. We were either going to do an asset sale and we were going to leverage the assets because he's selling the company for what the assets are worth, pretty much. We were going to leverage the assets with an ABLE, which is what we call an asset-based lender, and probably pull the capital to pay him part of the down payment, and then use the company's cash flow to actually buy the company out over time while we're running it and increasing the efficiency and how he's operating it. So that's kind of one of our main focuses and how we're going to probably purchase this company. But we really won't know until we get down there and kind of break down the rudimentary details of this, of the organization and how he's running it now. But from what we were told, he's running it very old school, like most of the baby boomers do. He's still taking the truck logs with pen and paper, and our generation, with technology. So we're looking at how we can add GPSs and just different things in the truck to make things more efficient and easier. So that's kind of what we're looking at. What ideas did you have, Gordon?
Well, let's have some fun.
Okay.
All right.
I like fun.
All right. Answer a couple of questions for me. How many trucks are you looking at there?
There's 12 trucks, 49 trailers.
Okay. Two different money leveraging approaches here. Okay, let's take the one that the other gentleman used. This was quite a number of years ago. What he ran into was that if he were to buy those trucks and do it through an asset-based lender, then he was going to have to come up with 10 to 15% of the actual cash that it was going to take to do that asset acquisition. And he didn't have any way of getting that money to himself. So what he did was he literally made deals with the drivers of the trucks to have them each buy their own truck. And he worked with a bank that would agree to finance each one of those drivers with the money that they needed to buy the truck. So they would do the finance on the truck, and then the owner or the new owner would come up with a little bit of the money. Each of them just signed a contract with the company for driving exclusively for the company. It was kind of like an immediate sale of the assets. So in other words, it was like a flip. Okay, in other words, he bought the company, and at the same instant, all these other drivers are now taking over the cost of those cabs and buying them themselves. And now they're working for the company with them owning the trucks, with him never having to come up with any money. So now he has the cash flow capability of the company without having ownership of the trucks. Now, sometimes people say, well, wait a minute, I want to own a lot of assets. Well, why? You want the income. You don't want assets. Assets are maintenance, they're liabilities, there are a lot of different
liabilities.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what you want is the cash flow. So if you can get these drivers to take over the purchase of the truck, and by the way, they feel really good about that because the idea of owning their own truck is exciting to them. And then the other thing that happens is once he took over the company, with everybody owning their own trucks, the maintenance cost on those trucks went to 50% or lower what they were before because now it was their truck. So they would take care of it. They would make sure to run it efficiently. He worked deals with them on gas so that they were putting their own gas into the truck, and they were working on so much gas per mile that they were given an allowance for. So if they were more efficient in how they drove the truck, they could make more money because they were driving the truck more efficiently. So all the things that you would want to have in it, it's kind of like Uber, right? They don't want to own taxi cabs. They want people owning taxi cabs. They want the cash flow, right?
That's right.
Right. So this worked at two levels. One is it helped him get those trucks acquired. That meant he now had the cash without him having to come up with the 10 or 15%. And the next thing you know, he's now owns the cash flow without having to own the cow, right? He owns the milk flow. And he doesn't have to feed the cow. He doesn't have to wash the cow. He doesn't have to maintain the cow. He doesn't have to worry about if a driver's going to show up to drive the cow. I mean,
he doesn't even have to milk the cow.
Yeah, he didn't have to milk the cow. Well, he does in a way because
in a way,
he's getting the orders for the jobs and all of that stuff,
right?
For all that stuff. Now, what he did on that was that. So that solved that problem. Okay, now you got all these trailers, right? Well, the guy wants to own his own cab, but the chances are he doesn't want to own the trailers. At least that's the way it worked out for him. So now he had to get the trailers part of it handled. Well, what he did there is he formed a second company, which was now a leasing company. and the leasing company bought the trailers and then leased them to him at a relatively favorable lease. But what he did is he created a profit opportunity for an investor who doesn't know anything about trucking, doesn't want to know anything about trucking, to invest in the leasing company with a lease already signed by an operating company. So it was a no-brainer getting people to put up the money for the leasing company, because the people who put up the money for the leasing company, they get to depreciate the trailers. So the depreciation was
Absolutely.
a great tax offset for them. So their after-tax return was great. They get a lease with an established company. He doesn't have to put up any of his own credit. I mean, do you see how these pieces come together?
And this, Gordon, I absolutely do. This is why what is being taught is so powerful. And if you can just grab just a small percentage of this and go with it, I mean, really the sky's the limit. This is why I love this. I love acquisitions. I love doing these deals because
Right.
it comes down to your creativity, and it comes down to, okay, if I want it bad enough, as you mentioned in the first, in the first webinar, if you want something bad enough, there's always a way.
Right, there is. And think about this too. You could do the leasing company with the trucks and the trailers, or you could do it with just the trailers. The reason that I kind of like the idea of selling them wherever possible to the driver. Sometimes the driver can't come up with their 10 or 15%, right? So they can't do it. So you might want to have some of the trucks continue to be owned then by the leasing company. But the point is, no matter how you structure it, you now have two great vehicles for getting the money to buy up these assets and then use that for your purchase, and then the cash flow of the company pays off everything, of course. And the reason I like getting the drivers as much as possible to own the trucks is they take much better care of them. They're much more effective and efficient when they own their own truck. They become more responsible. The no-show rate for a driver showing up for a haul is almost zero once they do that. And it just makes the operation itself so much stronger. And like I said, owning assets is not what you want. You want to own cash flow. You want to own earnings.
Absolutely. That's the
Right.
point of it.
Yeah. And so let other people own those assets who have a reason to want to own those assets, and leave yourself owning the cash flow and the profitability. And that's what the real goal is here.
Yes, 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 yes. And not only that's not just the goal for just this one company. That's really with any company, because you always look to mitigate, your liabilities, and you want to, minimize any exposure that you have going into these transactions. But this is awesome, Gordon. I appreciate that insight. You've challenged me to think a little bit differently, and I've sometimes, once you get accustomed to doing deals a certain way, and it works for you, you think, well, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. But this is a very creative solution that has really piqued my interest, and it's got me thinking totally different, man. I appreciate that.
There are other benefits too, and I'll just give you kind of a key to them. One of them is insurance. Okay. If the truck has an accident and there's a liability there because the truck driver and the truck is at fault, if you're the only owner of the company and he's just an employee, all the liability falls on you and your company. Now, you're
Hmm.
going to have insurance for that, but the insurance premium will be directly proportional to the risk that the insurance company is assuming. If you
Right,
have them own the truck, they're going to individually insure the truck. That'll be the prime insurance. And yes, the plaintiff will always go after the deep pocket. So they'll always see your company as a deeper pocket than your employee, right? So
right,
they'll
of
still come
course.
after you, but now you're behind his insurance company. So your insurance
Mm,
company only has to deal with it if they're actually get an award bigger than what the driver's insurance company can settle it for. And remember, the primary insurance company has an obligation to try to settle it for the amount of the insurance. So the chances are pretty good of there being an overflow from that really are much, much less. So your insurance company picks up less risk, you pick up less risk, and that usually reflects in lower costs as well for you. So that's just another thing. And there are many other areas too that there's little nuances of things that work out better. But all I'm saying is structure to me, you see, is everything. I see myself as a strategy structure guy. So
right.
so the structure can do wonderful things for it. And by having the leasing company, you pull all of your assets now into the leasing company and lease them to your operating company. Now, what that means is that your operating company now gets sued, let's say, for more money than you have in insurance. and they win.
Wow.
Okay, right? They win. All right. So, it was a crazy award. They won. Well, you can just fold up the operating company. The assets don't belong to them. They belong to the leasing company, so they revert back to the leasing company. I've yet to ever see where a leasing company is ever held responsible for what the operating company did. So now your leasing company has all the assets, right? And agreements that are structured with that asset company, it's either that asset company or another one. So you lease all your IP to your operating company. So the name, the phone numbers, the customer lists, anything that's IP is now leased to your operating company. All right. Now, what that means is that if that company is ever put out of business for any reason by anybody, including a government action, you just reconstitute the company under a new company, and then you go back to those companies that own the assets and you release them again. And literally,
Mm,
without skipping a beat, you're right back in business again. And the thing that that structure also avoids is if you have a company, let me just explain this. You have a company, somebody sues you for a massive amount of money, they win, okay? And you say, I'm going to take my assets and put them in another company and get them out from where these people can get them. And let's say you get them out before the judgment, okay? The new company will be considered by law a continuation of the original company. Even though your timing was what it was, all those things being true, it's still considered a continuation of that company. So the
right.
liability will follow to that company. But by having all this set up in advance, where it's your asset companies that lease to your operating company, then what happens is that there's no follow through. Okay, you've got separate and distinct companies operating that way from day one or from way before the liability was incurred. And so there's nothing anybody can do about it. They can't follow it through to your companies that are holding the assets. So it's a great structure for operating. And again, that keeps your risks down, it keeps your insurance costs down, it keeps a whole bunch of things being much more efficient and effective for you. So you might want to think about how you even do that with your oil company, how you do it with your real estate company, certainly how you do it with the trucking company. And you can do it either as part of the structure for the acquisition, or you can do the acquisition in whatever method is most efficient to get the acquisition done. And then shortly thereafter, do that separation and make them clear and clean separate entities that enable you to go into the future with a lot more comfort.
This is interesting, Gordon, because now we're getting into uh, some details on asset protection, really. And
Yeah,
this is awesome. This is
yeah.
awesome, man.
Yeah, I hate working my life only to find some lawyer somewhere wants to take it all away from me.
You'll find one too, man. They're there.
Yeah,
They're
no,
there.
no, they are.
Most definitely.
It's a crazy country we live in, and I'm not one for litigation. So the way I protect myself is to make myself immune from the litigation in the first place, or to make it so that they can sue us to the moon, and it won't do them any good anyway. Okay,
Right,
because
right.
there's no assets there. So yeah, come take this piece of paper that is the state charter for the company. It's all yours.
I love it, man. I love it. Let me ask you this question, Gordon. And there were some things that I was reading, just in the programs, and I'm sure other people may have this question. How do you feel about a person after they do one acquisition? Do you think that it's more beneficial to kind of beam in on a particular business model, meaning if you're going after, let's say, the trucking industry, you're looking for other trucking companies, or do you think, kind of taking a shotgun approach, as we said before, and targeting any company that's available to purchase? What do you think is the more effective method?
I tend to believe in focus. Okay, and
Hmm.
here's one of the reasons why. See, right now, you and your partner have to supply all this creativity, right? Because every time you have a deal, it's always different, right? And
Absolutely.
right, and then you got
Absolutely.
to figure it out. You got to anyway. But let's say you were to focus on building a trucking company. I'm just picking that out. It could be oil company, it could be whichever one you want to focus on, or maybe you only focus on two or three. You can still accomplish the same thing. But basically, you want to get to where your creativity is not the key element anymore, because the difference is like the old way that they manufactured a rifle. Every piece was made by hand. So every piece that
Mm.
worked had to be fitted as a custom to that particular rifle, and the parts weren't interchangeable. So it meant if anything broke, somebody had to go back and remake one-on-one the part that fit that particular firearm so that it would work again, right? So,
Hmm.
and that's true in cars, it's true in everything. That's how they used to be made. Everything was custom. And then somebody got the idea of a production line, right? And standard parts. So now you would produce a part to a tolerance. The tolerance was such that when you put the parts together, they would always work together. And you now had interchangeable parts, and you could do mass manufacturing and dwarf the amount of production you could do if you were doing everything custom and by hand. Well, what you want to do is the same thing. See, right now you're doing everything by hand, which is cool because you're making money and it's working and it's great. But at some point, you want to get to where you got a factory and you don't have a custom shop, right? So
Mm.
you can't do that if you're always going into whatever shows up, because every time something shows up, it's going to be different. So what you want to do is get yourself to the point where you pick a good industry, you understand the industry, you see where its growth is, and now you focus in on that and you train a team to deal with a fairly narrow range of the issues that come up and the structures that are necessary to solve them. And the next thing you know, you've got a team that does it, and you can be on the fantail of your yacht in the Mediterranean, and the deals can still get done.
Awesome. No, that makes perfect sense, man. And I've been taking the approach of, you know, what my, what my streamline has been. My focus has just been the baby boomers, because it's just so many opportunities here. But after you explaining that, it makes sense to, kind of hone in on, get at the helm of it, and kind of go from there. So.
Yeah. So now that doesn't mean that you can't expand yourself to doing, you got three companies now, or you'll have
Mhm.
three when you get this trucking company. So, that you can do this with three companies and then turn each one into its own little manufacturing machine, right? And then from there, you can expand to the next one. But what I'm saying is at some point, you don't want to keep these things custom. You want to take it
Mm.
where you can build a team of people who can operate in a narrow enough range. Because you see, the one thing you can't replace easily is your creativity and your vision and your insights into these things. Okay, that's the thing that's very hard to replace, because if people had it, they don't need you, right? They can go out and do it
Right.
for themselves. So the reality is you're going to end up always hiring people who are hireable as opposed to entrepreneuriable. I, I just made that word up.
That's good. That's
Yeah,
good. It's
yeah.
good.
So you got to deal with the fact you build companies out of people you can hire. You've got to bring it down to a formula for them that they can deal within that formula. And then maybe once in a while, they'll come to you and they'll say, we got this round peg and we can't get it in our square hole here. And now you only have to deal with that. You get them past the obstacle, and now they can finish out the rest. And now that's part of their new quiver of arrows. They got a new arrow to shoot when they need one. But by getting each of those structures to where you've got a team that you've built that can now handle the acquisitions and now mostly don't need you, then you're good. And remember, when you're doing it from no base, you need every bit of creativity that you've got. But when you're doing it from an established base, you don't need that anymore. So the people that you're going to train do not have to be as nuanced as you. They don't have to be as insightful or anything like that. They can deal with the more traditional challenges that acquisitions come up with. So for them, the job will be a whole lot easier, and they can't leave you and go do it for themselves. Why? Because if they leave you to go do it for themselves, they have no base, right? You
Makes
know,
sense.
so now you've locked them in. And the thing that I always try and do when I build these teams is to have people with different expertise, two or three different people that together get it done. One might be strong in the area of the legals and the structure, another might be strong
Yes.
in knowledge of the business. I mean, you have different people so that, again, they can't individually go out and replicate what you do. Okay, and that's an important part of it because you want them tied to the company, and you don't want to make necessarily entrepreneurs out of your employees. You want them
Right.
to benefit strongly from being a great employee. So you have bonuses, you have
Right.
incentives, you have equity shares, you have all those kind of things.
Compensation plan.
Right, right, that make them really happy. Okay, and if they're doing a good job, they should be. And if it's results based, if your main part of your compensation is results based, then everybody's winning together.
Absolutely. And we found that very effective, even running the oil company. the gentleman that we ended up putting in replace of the mayor, we put him, of course we paid him a salary, but it's on performance. So it's a
Mhm.
performance base where he has the incentives put in place that if he, helps us to meet our goals and can push our guys to reach certain projections, then we'll increase his pay, as the company increases. And I always love that model of a person who will come in and work on the performance base. For one, it shows me that a person has drive and dedication, and they're pretty confident in what they can provide to the company as far as being effective in what they do. So
Yeah. We all learned from the people who came before us. I learned a lot from my dad as well. And I had one and maybe two other mentors in my life I learned a lot from. And that really helps because it's always hard to start from ground zero. It's very difficult. So I had some really good help in the early days. And when added to what I could identify on my own, it worked really well for me. One of the things that I observed my dad doing, he didn't tell me this, I just watched him. He would have to hire a salesman, let's say, okay? So when he
hmm
talked to that salesman, he would tell him that there's three ways that that salesman could be compensated. He says, one is we pay you a salary and occasional bonuses based on your volume. The other is we pay you a base and then commission. And then the other is we pay no base, no bonuses, but a really fat commission. And then you would listen to the difference in the commission rate and you would get it that anybody doing a decent amount of sales would make a lot more money on the commission. Anyway, no matter what they said, he only hired the people who said they wanted to work on commission because his belief was is that when a person says, look, I'm a great salesman, I just want the most you can pay me. If that's commission, that's what I want. And that was his attitude. And he always hired great salespeople.
It's almost the philosophy of, the eat what you kill philosophy.
Yeah.
And those people who have it, they're go-getters, and they're going to make, they're not coming in looking, how can I drain the company? And that was something, we were sitting in our weekly meeting for the oil company, and myself and other partners, we were talking, and we all agreed on a model of, we don't even look at the hourly rate anymore. We look more as far as what value is that person bringing to the company, because that value will definitely set aside, I guess, the amount that we would pay them, because it's like, hey, I could pay you an hourly rate and you can milk the clock and, you'll do just what you need to do to get the job done, or you're going to be of value to the company and we're going to pay you for that
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
a substantial way.
Yeah.
So
No, I'd rather write big checks like that. I really would.
I look, I would too. I
Yeah.
would too.
Yeah. It never hurts my hand to write those checks to people who are working on a performance basis. One last thing, because we are going to run out of time in about 7 minutes.
Okay.
And when you and I chatted briefly the last time, you had mentioned something to me about ways and methods and sources you have of raising money, and that some of
Mhm.
them potentially could be available to our pro members. What did you have in mind there, and what are your thoughts? Let's talk about that.
That's great. I'm glad that you brought that up. So some of the ways that we source private capital, of course, it will be contingent on the opportunity that's presented to us. But mostly, if let's just say I'm starting from a person who doesn't have the resources and have the things that I have in place. I'm talking from a person who's learning the business, and you're looking to source private capital. I would definitely start with the base of professionals in the field that I'm in, and those professionals, a lot of times you will find them on platforms like LinkedIn, just various platforms that you could connect to and plug into. But it all goes down to, Gordon, the way that we're pulling this money together. It goes down to the deal, and it goes down to the opportunity that's really there, and that's where the value is. And that's why I made mention of the fact that money is not always in its paper form, but it also comes in the equivalent form, which is an idea. And we're good at selling those ideas once we have it, kind of buttoned up and it's tight and we know what the opportunity is. We put that opportunity in front of, as many people as we possibly can. And those people, let's just say, for instance, I came to you, Gordon, and said, hey, Gordon, we got this opportunity. We're not begging for money, for one, but we're coming and presenting an opportunity where you can make some money. I just need, 5 or 10 minutes of your time. I want to show it to you. If it's something that piques your interest, and great. If not, pass us along to the next person who may know something. Who do you know that is interested in these things? And what we found happened was we built a base or a clientele of people who had money sitting around, 401ks, IRAs. We met a lot of doctors, lawyers, attorneys, accountants, professionals who come into influxes of cash. And what happens is when these deals make sense, all it takes is to connect with the right person, and they will actually go out and bring other people who they're connected to into these transactions as well. So a lot of the ways that we have done it thus far, not just in real estate, but even in business, even with the oil company, is we've leveraged relationships that we've had with people, and we've also leveraged the opportunity that we've had in front of us, and we've took it out, and put it in front of people. So great thing is, if you're not good with that, you can always research and look up people, or use the people that you're connected to. If you're a pro member, that means that you're connected to Gordon, you're connected to the resources on the platform, and that means you would be connected to people like myself, anyone else that's in this space and in this field. And now you find out that you have this vast or majority vast opportunities and these vast resources at your fingertips is where I'm getting at. So that's how we're kind of doing things without really diving too deep in it, because I know we're running short on time, Gordon.
Is this something that's replicatable? Could you do this for somebody else?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
yeah, so in other words, if folks call us here and they say, look, I heard you talking to our fledgling business empire builder, and he had this great idea on how I might raise some money for this, I'd like to talk to him. You don't have any problem with that, right?
Absolutely not.
All right, that'd be really cool. By the way, that reminds me, if you could jot this name down, his name is Jose, Jose, Monet, Monet, actually a relative of the painter Monet.
Okay.
Anyway, he's one of our
Really?
yeah, he's one of our pro members, and he said he had something that he wanted to discuss with you. So I'm going to
Okay.
give him your contact information, and you'll know who he is when I send out the email for both of your contact information. So does that work for you?
That'll be perfectly fine. Be glad to talk with him.
Great, really, really perfect. All right. Well, do you have any thoughts or comments you want to share before we sign off here? Is there any advice you want to give or questions you want to ask me
Well,
or whatever?
absolutely, Gordon. I'll sign off. I'll finish this off by saying, just go out and do it. I mean, these opportunities are here. The window of opportunity is very small. So you got to kind of jump out there and go for it. You're not going to know all the answers. You're not going to know how to evaluate it properly the first time, but that is the greatest learning experience, is actually going through the process and learning from being involved. We've learned more in these business acquisitions going out and not knowing everything than we have really, kind of sitting behind and gathering a whole bunch of knowledge. We talked about the paralysis of analysis and wanting to analyze and have all the green lights line up before you pull the trigger, before you hit the gas and go. But what I'm saying is, get the basics, get the knowledge that you need, and then get involved. And then what you do is go out and bring people around you and build a team that can help support whatever opportunity it is that you have. And I know that Gordon has been a great support, not just to myself, but to many others. There's other success stories besides myself. And, the structure and the system that he has in place and that you have in place now, Gordon, is awesome. And the team that you have in place. And, I'm just surprised that there's not more of these stories popping up and surfacing, especially in the time that we're in now. And this window, like I said, will not be open very long. We have to get in and kind of, take advantage of it. And, this is what they call the great wealth transfer. That's the era that we're in now. There's
Hmm.
so much that's being transferred over from the baby boomer generation to the newer or the younger generations. And, it's just one of those things you got to take advantage of and get out there and do it.
Well, that's
Don't be
great.
scared.
That's great. And that's a great observation. One potentially last thing here. One of the things that resonated with me when you told this to me, how many times have you taken these videos, the webinar, the actual
Oh
training
man,
itself? How many times have you taken any given one of them and listened to them or watched them?
multiple times, Gordon. There's times. In fact, my business partner and I, tomorrow night, we won't be going home. We'll be sitting in our office going over. I'm telling you, we literally take these courses like a PhD program. So a lot of the videos and webinars we've listened to 6, 7, 8 times, and we don't just listen to them straight through. We're pausing it. We're taking notes. We're jotting things down. We're understanding how you came to certain conclusions and the evaluations, and we're breaking it down until we know it like the back of our hand, and then we take that out into the marketplace and we execute. The formulas have already been successful in front of us. So
That's absolutely great, and it's the way it should go because, see, eventually you've already done this, and I admire what you did there. Is you literally took the wording that I use, the phrasing that I use, the change in my voice, the tenor of my voice. You've mirrored them so well, and it's like, guys, sometimes I listen to you and I say, I was like listening to myself here. And in reality, I am listening to myself.
no, you absolutely are. You absolutely are. And one thing, and here's another thing that I've always been told, which is, success has, it has a feet print, it has patterns behind it. You can look behind success and you can see, okay, here's how a person got there. And something I was once told is you can never duplicate a person's success until you first duplicate their knowledge. So we really have honed in on the knowledge, the wealth of knowledge that has been provided through this program, and I've literally duplicated that knowledge onto myself, and it has given me business acumen on a level where when I go in to do these deals, people know he's been here before, and this is not his first rodeo. He's acclimated, and this is the real deal. The owner of the trucking company told me over the phone. He said, Brian, after talking with you on the phone, you're the guy that I've been waiting for, because he's talked to a lot of people who wanted to come and purchase the business, but he's never talked to a person, who has come to him on this level of, for one, understanding, and number two, making that cosmic bond. So
That's great. That's great. Well, again, I want to thank you for sharing all of this stuff with us. It was fantastic to have you do that. And I just
thank you
want you
for
to,
all you do, Gordon.
yeah, well, thank you. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate your willingness to share what you've learned with all of our folks because you're out busy doing what you're doing, and there's not a lot of time value return in sharing it with other people, except I know for me, the visceral return is very high. In other words, the idea that I love sleeping at night knowing that I've been a help to a lot of people. So that's always a secondary value to me. But anyway, Brian,
Absolutely.
thank you very, very much. Thanks everyone for being here today and for being a participant in this. I very much appreciate that as well. We have another one of these that'll be coming up in about a month. It'll be the second Wednesday of April, and that'll be the next time that we have to get together. So until then, I wish everybody the best of success, and I hope everybody has a great weekend and a great month.